Spring is such a beautiful time of year, and Forsythia shows that so much. So this is a walk beside springtime. We're going to start off with brushes, a 2-inch flat. We're going to also be using a number 12 round. We will be using a number 6 round and a number 2 round. We're going to be using our number 1 rigger and a very fine liner. We're also going to be using a sponge today. Not a whole lot, but just on the sidewalk part. And we're also going to be using our misket, and we're going to be using our salt. Colors today, pretty basic coloring. We're going to be using cerulean blue in the sky. We're going to be using all of our browns, our umber, our sienna. We're going to be using our black. We will be using our ultramarine blue if you want to deepen your sky a bit. Definitely your cadmium yellow, a little bit of yellow ochre, just if you want to make your yellows a little bit deeper in some areas. And of course, a little bit of sap green. For your misketing, take your time when you misket today and do some branches, especially the branches that are going to go into your brown background. Also, some of the branches from that big tree that are going to go into your dark brown background, because it's going to be so important that we keep those branches a little bit lighter. So do definitely take your time on your misketing. I'm doing my sky for you and the hillside in the background on just a regular sheet of paper so that all of my misketing doesn't get in the way of showing you what to do. And then I'll revert it back to my regular drawing. Your sky is cerulean blue. You can mix it with a little bit of ultramarine blue if you'd like, depending on what color you want your sky. But you want it to be nice and wet because we're going to be adding in our brown while it's wet so that you get that nice fuzzy bleed. So you want to make sure that your sky is nice and wet. You can move it around if you need to soften all of your colors together. And then you're going to do your the perimeter of your brown skyline. You want to, or your brown background, I'm sorry, your mountain line, and you want to make it uneven. You don't want that to be just a straight line. You want it to be a little bit uneven so that when it does start to bleed, it's going to bleed very unevenly. Then you can fill it in with your umber color. I mixed a little bit of black with my umber, but again, depending on what coloring you want. And then I'm going to soften it just by moving it around a little bit. Don't let it get out of hand for you. I'm taking my little rigger and pulling off some of the edge on the top towards the sky so that I get a nice uneven tree line. I'm going to let it sit for a moment, and then I'm going to put some salt on it. I'm not salting everywhere. I'm picking specific spots that I want to salt. So you can decide where you want some extra texturing, and then you want to just leave it sit. I also have that tree drawn in on my other picture. So where your tree is drawn in, just take a paper towel and blot out some of that brown so that you don't have a hard brown line where your tree is. Now coming back to my regular picture, I painted in with that same brown some horizontal lines, which is where some rock formations would be in my water. We're going to start off by putting in our Forsythia color. So that's going to be our nice cad yellow. I did not mix it with anything. It is just straight cad yellow because I want that yellow to be nice and vibrant. And we will be adding other colors later. So I want it to be nice and bright now. You want to make sure that the top of your forsythia is nice and rough. You don't want just a smooth, straight line. And you especially want to make your pieces stand up where you have your miscuted branches because you want things to kind of coincide. Don't go the whole way up to your brown because you want to leave space for your water. So please make sure that you don't go the whole way up to your browns. Once you get your uneven top line to the top of your forsythia, then you can fill the rest of that in with your yellow, nice cad yellow, nice and intense. And while it is still wet, we are going to be dropping in some burnt umber mixed with a little bit of black just here and there, allowing it to bleed up into the pieces of your forsythia because that's going to show the density to the bush. Again, you want to leave as much yellow as possible, but you do want to have some density there so that you can fill in some branches later. This is all above the fence line. Nothing is below the fence line yet. Fill that all in, couple little dots here and there, and then we're going to throw on a little bit of salt. I'm just basically salting the areas where the brown is. Once your salt is on there, if you want to still add a little bit more, you can. Just drop it right into your salt and allow the salt to choose the path for it, for your color. Now we're going to go undo our sidewalk. I'm not sure if it's a sidewalk really or a kind of like a dirt path, but we're going to be filling that in first with burnt umber. And then once the burnt umber is on, if you want to put in a little bit of burnt sienna, you can. But then we will also be putting in a little bit of black just here and there to change up the color because we don't want it all to be one color. And when we're finished with putting in our black where we want it to be, then we'll salt that. This is just the first wash. We are going to be sponging over this, so you don't want it to get too dark right off the bat. Once you get your pathway in, then we're going to go up and we're going to do the area between the fence posts, or I'm sorry, between the top of the fence and the bottom of the fence. We will be using the same color and doing the same thing, dropping in some black. Don't worry about all of those little posts for the fence because they're going to be black and you can go right over your color that you put down now. So paint in your same burnt umber color, drop in a little bit of black, try to coincide your blacks with where you put it on your walkway, and we'll also put a little bit of salt up there. Now you want to give the salt time to work. So we're going to go ahead and move up to our trees in the background. And we're going to be painting in some very fine tree trunks, but we're also going to do a lot of squiggling. That's one of my favorite painting words, where we're going to be just doodling real fast with that same brush, the same rigor, and we're going to be making it look like there's a lot of branches back in there. So the easiest way to do that is just with your nice fine brush, and you're going to go in all directions, up, down, left, and right. I'm also doing some dry brushing down at the base where I lay my brush on its side and just drag it upwards. But you can see somehow I can squiggle with my brush, draw some tree trunks in there. Now this certainly isn't every tree trunk, but the impression of. And then you'll just move your brush in all directions to get those squiggly lines going left, right, up, down, all directions. There's no right or wrong direction for this. You just want to fill in all of that area with your nice fine brush, a lot of fine lines, so that it looks like there's a whole lot of dead, dormant trees back in there. And you're going to do that the entire way across your painting. So you're going to go from left to right. You don't have to do that. You can start in the middle and go in each direction. You can stop and go to a separate area and work and get it all to combine at the very end. But you want to have those nice squiggly looking trees the whole way across. If there's an area that your salt worked really well and you really don't want to go over that and ruin that effect, then certainly don't. You can just leave that as part of your background. But otherwise, you're going to go ahead and you're going to take this all the way across. You can also do it in different values. Some of it can be very pale, where other places can be more intense in color. That's up to you how to decide. Now, once you have worked on your trees for a while, you don't have to finish it, certainly. You can go back to that at any time. But we're going to start to put in our blue water. When you put in your water, you want to leave lines of white because those lines of white is where the rapids are. This is up in Ohio, Powell, so you want to leave some lines of white. I mixed my ultramarine blue with a little bit of sap green to get a nice bluish green color. And I'm going all the way across horizontally. But if I run into some of my yellow, I'm going around my yellow. I don't want to go over my yellow. So you want to make sure that when you are doing your horizontal lines and you're leaving some white, you're also not going over your yellow. You want to leave your yellows and just go around that. If you feel safer sketching it in first with a pencil, just doing lines with a pencil, you can certainly do that. But you want to definitely leave some nice white lines, which is the froth from the rapids. Now I filled in my little piece of grass in that upper or the middle right area, and I'm going to get ready now to do my sponging. My sponging is going to be done with that same umber and black, nice and wet, and I'm going to be sponging the area of my walkway and the area in between the top and the bottom of my fence. It does not matter if you go over any of the fence part because, again, your fence is going to be black. But you want to lightly sponge in. What you're doing is you're creating the look of a lot of dried leaves. So the areas that don't get paint on them are going to be the leaves, but otherwise, you're getting a darker ground area by sponging. So just lightly sponge it. Just have the tip of your sponge be hitting your paper. You don't want big blobs of color. So you want just the tips of your sponge. And then you're also going to be doing that up in the base of your forsythia. You don't want it to be in the tops of your forsythia. You just want it to be down at the bases where all of the more barren branches would be. A little bit of sponging here and there. You can always add some sponging there, but it's harder to take it off. So be careful you don't overdo. Now I'm also going to add just a little bit at the top of my fence into my forsythia with my brush. I'm going to dry brush vertically, so I'll just lay my brush down on the top of the fence and pull my brush vertically just to get a little bit more of that color in there. Not a whole bunch, very little of that. If you feel that you don't need it, that your sponging worked, or you just really don't want to try any of that dry brushing, you certainly don't have to, but it just adds to the density of the base of the Forsythia. And now comes that big tree. We're going to be painting in the whole tree. Umber mixed with a little bit of black, not too dark because we're going to go in later and deepen the shadow on the right side of the biggest branches. But you want to go ahead and fill your tree in, paint your tree in, all of your branches, not only the trunk, but also all of your branches. We're not going to be taking the misket off until the very end. So you want to make sure that your tree is all done so that when we do take the misket off, you can go ahead and connect all of those branches to your tree also. So it's important that your misketed branches reach the tree that you are painting now. You don't want them hanging in midair when all is said and done. Your branches should have elbows. They should not all just be straight up in the air. Make a lot of branches. A lot of both branches with your number 2 round, but then also branches with your rigger and your real fine liner. You can do a lot of squiggling off of the edge of some of these branches also. Take your time on your tree. You don't have to do it all at one time. You can come back to it. But at least get the parts done around your misket so that when you do take your misket off, you can go ahead and paint your misketed parts and not have to worry about finishing your tree. Take your time. Make sure that you are happy with where your tree is sketched before you try to paint it, because if you don't like where it's sketched, painting it's not going to change that. It doesn't have to be a real full tree. It's more of a tree just with those 2 or 3 branches and that nice V shape in the middle. That's just allowing that nice sky color to come into view. So I worked mainly with my biggest brush first. Then I went to my number 2. Then I went to my rigger, and then my finest little liner. I did throw a little bit of salt on my biggest branches, my biggest trunk branches, but there's no reason to salt any of your little fine branches. keep working all of your branches. I did one branch, one trunk at a time. It just made it easier so I could see how much to fill in, but you certainly don't have to do it that way. You can do all of your big trunks first and then all of your lesser width branches and then all your finery at the very end, whatever is the best for how you would like to do it. But you just want to make sure that you get that all put in before any of your misgetting is taken off. So you want to make sure that it is all completely painted in, other than some of the real fine branches, but you want to make sure your big trunks and branches are put in. Now my tree is complete. I like how it looks. It looks balanced. So now I'm going to move down to my fence. I'm going to be painting the upper part of my fence as well as the lower part. I'm going to be filling in the middle section to my fence that is farthest away from me, because back there you're not going to see fine individual fence posts. Because of the distance and because of the perspective, it's going to look like it's all together as one piece. I'm not going to bring that too far forward, and as I come a little bit more forward, I'm just going to be blending that off with a little bit of water so that it's not coming too far forward. That's just, I would say, the back quarter of the fence in the distance. I'm going to let that dry really well. I'll do the other part that is even farther away, and this would be the inside of that, so that's just all painted in. And I'm going to dry brush inward, dirty that dirt up a little bit closer to my Forsythia. Let that dry really well before you go ahead and start painting your top and bottom to your fence. Your top railing and your bottom railing are just going to get a nice wash of watered down black on them, but I am leaving a very fine strip of the paper not painted. that's going to be where the light is hitting the width of the fence. So I'm going to be leaving white on that when I paint my fence darker. It has to have some color on it now. So this watered down black can be your whole fence, but when it comes time to paint the actual fence, the darker black, I'm going to leave a very pale strip of this original color. And you will see it as I paint it later on. But you just want this nice watered down black now on your top and bottom portion of your fence. Allow everything to dry really well, and then we're going to go ahead and paint in with our black, straight black, not watered down, and you're going to leave that really small strip on the top of each piece. Straight black, leaving that little tiny strip all the way down. Same thing on the bottom, painting it with black, not watered down, and leaving a very thin strip on the top. That very thin strip on the top is where the light is hitting, so it's just getting a little bit of a light reflection on it. Doesn't mean that it's not black, it's just picking up light. When we're done painting that, then comes the fun part where we start to paint all of the posts. If you feel more comfortable sketching them in first with a pencil, you can. I did use a ruler for this. I wanted my lines to be nice and straight. vertically. There are thicker posts, and they get closer together as they go towards the distance. Same with your thin posts. They are separated out farther, but as they go towards that solid piece that we already painted in, they get closer together. So again, if you feel more comfortable drawing them in with a pencil, you can, and then painting them in. But other than the few wider posts, they're nice, thin black lines. When you are all finished, you want to let that dry really well. Now we're going to be doing the shadows from that fence on to the walkway. The shadows, they don't have to be perfectly straight, meaning they don't have to have a perfectly straight edge, but your fence posts lines should still be straight going horizontally. They will not be as detailed, and I did not count how many I had on my fence and make that exact amount on my shadow reflections. Nobody's going to notice that. But when I painted the top to my fence in, I did dry brush off the edge a little bit to make it look like it was shadowed among, the leaves on the walkway, so it wasn't a perfectly straight line. And then you want to just go ahead in, and where it's solid in the back, you want to paint it in solid on the walkway. And then I just used my rigger and drew some lines from the fence to the top of my shadowed fence, made sure they were going straight across horizontally. You don't want them to go at an angle, and fill that in nicely, and then let that dry real well also. Again, if you think you need to put pencil lines in, you certainly can. I'm not sure that that's really necessary for the shadows, but if you really want to, it's fine. Now everything is coming into place. We are getting closer and closer to the end. We want to go up now into the Forsythia part, and we want to draw some individual branches down in that dense part of the Forsythia. Not so much the upper part, but down into that dense part. We want to draw some individual branches, again going in all directions. You want to try to match them up with the branches that are miscuted so that the ones that are miscuted aren't going to look like they're just hanging in midair. Certainly does not mean that you have to have an ending to every single one of them, but you want to go ahead and put in some dark branches that are going to give the reference that that's really heavy into a lot of branches down in there. You don't have to paint 1,000 branches, but you want to make it look like there's a lot going on down there. Use your rigger and some umber mixed with some black and get that all painted in. All the way across. Now you want to make sure that you have everything done up to this point before you remove your misket. If you don't, go ahead and finish everything and then come back to this part of the video because you don't want to take your misket off too soon. The misketing should basically be almost the last thing that you do by taking that all off. So you're going to end up taking off all of your misket once you are happy with everything else, and then we will be painting in all of those misketed areas. Go ahead and remove your misket, but only if you are done with everything else. Now, once all of your misket is removed, you can go ahead and start painting it in. I started with my yellows just so I would not paint everything and then not leave enough yellow. I wanted to make sure I got a lot of nice yellows in because that's basically the most important part of the painting to me is that beautiful yellow forsythia. So I painted in all of the parts that I wanted to show the nice yellow first, and then I went to my umber and black and did my branches and my branches within the forsythia bush. The branches that I did off of my tree that went in front of the background trees, I made sure that that umber and black was just a little bit lighter than the background. That was the purpose of having that misketed, so that that would really show up well in front of the dark trees in the background. I wanted that branch to really show up well. After I got done putting in all of my yellows, then I did all of my browns, and then I went down to the leaves on the ground and painted them in with the same umber and black, but I also dabbed in a little bit of sienna just to change up the color a little bit. All of this misketing, it's going to take you a little bit of time. You don't have to do it all at one time. You can hop all over your painting and do it however you want, because it doesn't matter if you get hard lines on branches or anything like that. So you can hop all around and do it however you'd like to do it. Take your time though. Make sure it's important that you keep that nice yellow. So I would do my yellows first and then go ahead and do my other coloring. You can see now everything colored in, and you can see how I kept that tree branch color just slightly lighter than my background color, and then that way it shows up really well. I was careful painting in my branches, especially the branches in front of my sky. It's not so much painting the branches in front of the brown, because if you go outside the lines, it's not really going to matter. But you don't want to go outside your Muscadine lines where there is the nice blue sky. Once you get that all painted in, then you are basically finished. If you want to do any splatter, you can do some splatter on the ground with some umbers, but you are done. Enjoy your springtime. It's a beautiful time of year. Love those yellows. Happy painting.